Hi, I'm Kelly Hogan, and welcome back to my Zero Carb Life. Today, it's a little bit different than usual. So, sometimes I have group members come on and share their story of breakthroughs that they've had in the class. And so it's people that I'm used to seeing on a weekly basis. And then sometimes I'll have an expert come on and share what they know in the field of whatever it is that they study related to carnivore. And I was just talking in Instagram messages the other day with a lady named Dr. Jocelyn Foran. And she said she had something she'd like to share on the channel. And I realized, well, I don't really know her. I follow her account, love the content. I will post a link below, but we don't know each other. But I said, well, as a doctor, what are you most interested in? And I looked it up. She's a 28-year anesthesiologist, but that's not what she wanted to talk about. She has suffered for years, and carnivore has helped. So I'm going to let her tell the story, but welcome to the show, Dr. Jocelyn.
Thank you, beautiful human. Thank you, Kelly Hogan, and everybody out there. I couldn't be happier to be here.
So why'd you reach out? What did you want to share?
Well, I think it's just helping to create an awareness about not only the safety of eating an animal-based carnivore diet, but also the potential to thrive this way as well. So I think I have a life like everyone else, marked by a little good and a little bad. And for me, my dad left when I was 8 and didn't come back. And that took my family and plunged us into a rather deep poverty. My mom had something called juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, so an autoimmune condition that was quite debilitating. And I confess, I mothered my mom, right? So I grew up perhaps a little older than most. But I knew there was one way out of poverty. And if I worked really hard and got good grades, I could go to school, become a doctor, and have some stability. And so I did those things. And I'm so very grateful for all the people that loved me and held the doors open for me to get to those places. But by the time I was 24, I was living pretty cheap. I was, eating all the carbs and up late, not sleeping much, studying hard, partying hard too. And then when I was 24, I was diagnosed with my own autoimmune condition, ulcerative colitis. And that was actually just within months of me finishing medical school. And my gastroenterologist, I said, look, it's a digestive disorder. I'd probably be best served by, changing my diet. He said, no, just take the pills. Actually, the one thing he said not to eat was carrageenan, which is quite interesting because it really is rather horrible for the colon.
Oh,
But yeah, so I just took the pills like a good little, rule follower, box checker girl. Right? And this was before there was a whole lot of searching on the internet and I was busy, so I just did the things. And I'm Canadian, so I went to work and I was busy with clinical duties. I finished my residency, started my clinical practice when I was 30. And I was flat out. I was doing 24-hour call shifts. I was eating Canada's food guide. I had 3 amazing, beautiful boys from the time I was 29 till I was 33. But as my 30s wore on and I was doing all the carbs and the fruits and the veggies, I wasn't feeling so good. And then it was suggested to me, well, go vegetarian and that'll help. And that wasn't great. And they said, well, you're not vegetarian enough. You should go vegan. And by the time I was 43, my colitis was controlling me. I wasn't controlling it. And it is, I will be honest, I'll be quite frank, a rather difficult condition to have when you're trapped in an OR for like 6 hours on a case, right? Yeah, no access to a bathroom. So by the time I was 43, I said to my specialist, maybe you should just cut out my colon because I can't live like this anymore, right? And that was the first time that a dietary switch was suggested. And he said, well, why don't you look at the specific carbohydrate diet? And so I did. And within like 2 weeks, a change was made. And then I was like, well, if specific is good, what about low carb and no carb? So I went from specific to paleo to keto to low carb keto. And then almost 3 years ago now, I gave up all carbs. So I gave up all vegetables and plants, and I've been off my drugs.
okay. This is awesome. All right. I don't even know. What is the specific carbohydrate diet? What does that entail?
Great question. So it was developed many decades ago for people living with ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease, so inflammatory bowel diseases. So they were a group of carbohydrates chosen because of their digestibility and the fact that they probably were going to cause much inflammation. So there like is a specific, do's and don'ts. There's like the legal and illegal list. But there were still a lot of things in there that were still quite aggravating. And for me, I found that even residual amounts of fiber and carbohydrates were still aggravating my symptoms. And so only by giving it up altogether did I find the magic. So, and it took me a while to do that. I hadn't even heard of the carnivore diet, I'll be honest, until I think it was like 2020 or 2021. It
Oh.
was the Breckenridge conference. And yeah, I was like, well, wow. So this is actually a way people eat and it's safe. I think I'll give it a try.
So it's been almost 3 years
Yeah,
that you've been plant-free.
absolutely. Yeah.
And how
So
much do you struggle now with ulcerative colitis? How are your symptoms?
my symptoms they're gone. So there will be times I confess that like stress, as it would with
Yes.
any diet, might cause a bit of exacerbation of symptoms, but I do all sorts of things to reduce stress through meditation, walk, time in nature, and that helps me too. But it's just amazing that when I look at the scope of patients I've cared for over 3 decades, this overlying theme of we were all misled, both patients and physicians.
Yeah.
And it's this high insulin diet that then results in so much suffering, right? I have taken little children, like 3-year-olds, to the OR so we could pull every tooth out of their head. I've taken, 50-year-old men to the OR so we cut off their legs for their diabetes.
Yeah.
60-year-old women that we can bring in the OR so we can put catheters in their arms so they go on dialysis. So things that don't have to be, right? And I just felt like I've meet people at the end, right? When they've got to the end of their disease. But the Archbishop Desmond Tutu has a beautiful quote that we have to stop pulling bodies out of the river. We need to go upstream and keep them from falling in. So I feel this opportunity to have an inroad to be able to prevent somebody, maybe somebody with colitis that doesn't need to have their colon cut out, maybe somebody that's diabetic that might say, hey, maybe I'll get rid of my carbohydrates and reverse my disease. But when I went to medical school, nobody said that chronic diseases were reversible. They were nothing but chronic and progressive. And I remember probably about 15 years ago, someone said that they reversed their diabetes. And I said, oh, that's impossible. Right. But oh no, I was very wrong. Yeah.
It's fascinating to me. I'm so excited when a doctor, someone who works with patients, someone with the degree can then, I hate that you had to be the patient, but when someone can be the patient and then find the cure is exactly opposite of
Yeah.
what we were told, because it's always have more fiber. A gut issue, have more fiber. And I
Absolutely.
had tons of IBS symptoms. Now, I found carnivore quite young when it was really ramping up. I was 25 when I cut out carbs. So I was never officially diagnosed, but my whole young adult years was either a long bathroom trip because it was going to be a struggle. You never knew,
Yeah.
or don't go far from home. We are not going to be hiking, kayaking. I mean,
No.
because the idea, long walks on the beach feel real different when there are no porta johns around.
Yeah.
Everything is just like this cloud of when am I going to need the bathroom?
I mean, you think about it, like adding high fiber to someone with irritable bowel syndrome or with inflammatory bowel disease, it's like taking a sunburn and treating it with some type of sandpaper, right? It's just going to
Yes.
make an irritated thing more irritated. So I just intuitively, but it has been, I've literally shoved down our throats that fiber is essential, and it is not. It's like any other carb. It is not essential.
No.
Yeah.
I was taking Metamucil because I couldn't get in enough fiber through my diet.
Yeah.
Chugging the Metamucil, and I mean, even just personally, not on the internet, a neighbor who I saw the other day. I hardly ever see this guy. He doesn't get out a lot. Well, maybe this is why, right? But I
Yeah.
said, hey, how are you doing? He said, oof, well, it's been a rough patch, ulcerative colitis.
Uh,
And I said, Oh, no. I said, I have not had to deal with that, but I hear that it's awful. I said, I had IBS symptoms, so I know a little bit what you mean. And he said, yeah, it's bad. And I am not very pushy with people in my day to day life. I didn't just be like, and here's your carnivore pamphlet, sir, but I said, have they, have you found any correlation with diet? And he said, well, I've got a list of things they won't let me eat.
Mm.
And you know good and well what one of those things was: red
Red meat.
meat.
Yes.
And when he said it, he doesn't know anything about what I do or who I am. I've probably seen him twice in my life. I said, "Did they told you don't eat red meat?" He said, "Yeah." And
Mm.
thoughts?
Yeah. And don't eat the thing that will definitely heal you. And I remember, like, during a flare, they would say, well, go to the flare diet. And the flare diet was basically like Cheerios, white bread, pasta, rice, bananas, just carbohydrates.
Yeah.
And it would create horrible bloating and pain and frequency. You'd be running the bathroom even more. It's so sad because it's been since the Flexner report back over a century ago, 1910, they stopped teaching physicians about nutrition in medical schools. As per the Carnegies and the Rockefellers, they had a petrochemical industry and drugs were going to be made through petrochemicals. So they went. Abraham Flexner visited 151 medical schools across North America and closed down all but 31, changing the curriculums, stipulating that doctors should diagnose and prescribe. And we're no longer taught about preventative actions. But this was the first time since Hippocrates that doctors had not learned about nutrition. Even the granddaddy of medicine, Sir William Osler, he knew how to cure type 2 diabetes back in the 1890s. He wrote about eat meat and eggs and nothing from the garden.
I have seen some of his writings and it
Yeah,
blows my mind. We've
yeah.
had the answer this entire time.
But what happened with insulin being invented in 1921 by
Yes.
Banting and Best, everybody just took the drug instead. And so they just dialed up more insulin and didn't really question it. They could eat whatever they wanted that way. But it also led to things like blindness and kidney failure and amputation, premature death. But for some reason, physicians haven't been curious enough to go back and ask the question, well, what do people do before all of this? The diseases of civilization, that's what we are experiencing, right? When the Europeans first came to North America, they noted that the indigenous people were immune to the diseases of civilization, right? And some of the indigenous people of the Midwest were some of the tallest, strongest humans on earth, absolutely human specimens, so fit. And the Inuit of the North, right? They ate a
Yes.
diet that was 80 to 90% fat, 10 to 20% protein. And the Vilhjalmur Stephenson, who was a Harvard anthropologist, spent over 10 years in the North with the Inuit and remarked that every time he went up there and lived that way and ate as they did, he felt so healthy. He was thriving, so much so that in the 1920s, he and a colleague were institutionalized. They were admitted to Bellevue Hospital, I think like in 1928, and stayed for a year. They were allowed to go one day passes, something like that, but just ate a carnivore diet. They had, all the tests done. There was nothing wrong with them. After a year, they were in prime health. And it was like, oh, well, I guess there's no news here. Right. And so that
Yeah.
information just went away. If it had been like, something bad happened, it would have been front page news. But because it was, nothing to complain about, they didn't actually get much press for it. But yeah, I just feel like the diseases of civilization are because of how we live, right? And so when we look at our processed foods, the fact that we aren't sleeping much, that we have stresses at the all-time high, all of these things feed into our illnesses, feed into hyperinsulinemia. When you look at the diseases of civilization, they all revolve around high insulin, and it comes out as a great chameleon in different forms. So it can be atherosclerosis. For some people, it's cancer. For some people, it's a heart attack. For some people, it's dementia. For some people, it's autoimmune or obesity or even sarcopenia. They lose their muscle. So, but it's all comes down to insulin. And I'd like to mention the mental health manifestations for so many, that are struggling with anxiety and depression, bipolar, schizophrenia. That is insulin resistance to the brain, right?
Yes.
And how many lives have been absolutely devastated early on because of insulin resistance, right? So we have to work together as a collective to get our insulin down and to get people feeling better.
I love that Belleview study so much. When they first took these men who had been thriving on mostly, seal and whale meat, very fatty meat, and
Yeah.
they put them in Bellevue for the study, at first, these men did not do well because
Being
lean. They
being
were
comfortable.
given lean meats and they kept trying to tell the doctors, this isn't what we ate. We don't feel as good. And their results, their labs, things weren't as good. Constipation, all the things that we know will happen with really lean meats.
Yeah.
And the doctors were so like in the box that they didn't want to listen to these guys. They were like, we have to have all the fat. Soon as they bumped their fat up to, like you said, 80 to 90%, that's a high fat carnivore diet, y'all.
Yeah.
And they were fine. They began to thrive. And you're right. How many people have even heard about it? But one person who has? My doctor, Dr. Dunlap, who is now retired, when he first told me all those years ago, so 21 years ago, he told me my problem was excessive carbohydrate intake, and I'm sure everything about me has just looked completely confused. He mentioned the Inuit people, like you just did, the
Yeah.
Bellevue studies. He was on it, but how many doctors do you think? I don't have a clue how he knew that.
No, I think what an incredible human he is, and I'm so glad he spurred on that bit of information for you and allowed you to thrive. Right, what an
Yeah.
incredible life you've had because of that bit of information.
Oh, that
Yeah,
one conversation literally took the trajectory of my life, which was just pain,
yeah,
unexplained weight gain. You mentioned kids having to have all their teeth pulled. In about a year's time, I had 12 cavities filled. That's until he told me that one conversation, not a cavity since.
yeah,
I mean, yeah, it's like everything in my life changed. So
yeah,
to hear you say that you went from being like in the operating room, kind of always
so,
on edge,
yeah, yeah.
and now you're
Right.
just thriving. I'm so happy for you, Dr. Jocelyn.
The thing is too, like even like all the other wonderful side effects, like I am lifting heavier now and doing more chin-ups than I could when I was 32, right? Like, like I am in better shape now than I was 20, 30 years ago because I am less inflamed, because I am eating all this wonderful protein and fat. My body's saying, yep, we'll take that, we'll turn that into muscle, right? And so I feel like I'm doing my body and my brain the service that they deserve, right? And yeah, even little vein things. I had a real sunburn probably about 13 years ago, and I had a sunspot. And within a month of going carnivore, it was gone. And I mean, it was like probably about like a half an inch big. It was like I did not expect that. So yeah, everybody always has some type of surprise, right? But yeah, it's been a wonderful journey.
I love hearing people's little non-scale victories.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. And I hear some quirky ones in the meetings. Really.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
It
Yeah.
tickles me. Okay. I have at least, well, my very next door neighbor, this is not the man, this is a lady, has had to have part of her colon intestines removed due to Crohn's. A
Yeah.
good friend of mine, same, due to Crohn's. What's your experience? Is it as helpful to Crohn's folks as you find it to be with ulcerative colitis?
It sure is. Yeah, because meat is it's quite interesting too, because when you look at I've had the opportunity to do a lot of, perioperative care. Like so you go around, you're around on people that have had ileostomy. So, what's coming out of the small intestines. And you never see chunks of meat,
Mm,
right? But you definitely see corn and lettuce and all the vegetables
Yes.
and the high fiber fruits. And that's part of the reason why even, quite frankly, carnivores poop less, right? That they are eating a diet that is so nutrient dense and that all those nutrients get absorbed by the small intestine. Really, there's very little that goes to the colon for processing. There's some absorption of the bile acids and absorption of the water. So what we excrete isn't the insoluble fibers that most people excrete. Instead, it's just bacteria. We are, 40 trillion cells, but we are 400 trillion bacteria. Everything from what's on our skin to in our gastrointestinal tract. So yeah, that's a lot of housekeeping to get rid of on a daily or every other day basis. And that's what feces is. It's mostly the remnant bacteria that serve their purpose and now they're gone. Yeah.
I know there are some folks who say if you're not pooping literally a few times per day, these are not carnivores,
Oh my.
a few times per day. I've had vegans say the more they feel like the more you go, this is a sign of health. And I'm like, that's just the more you shove in a tube, the more is going to come out the other side. But it just, the damage that it can do to these delicate systems in the meantime.
Absolutely, especially if what you're putting in is indigestible.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, yeah, and I've had people with diverticulitis that come in with flares because they're eating all this fiber. But yeah, what if you just eat a nice fatty meat-based diet and then let your colon simmer down, the inflammation settle, right? But I
Yeah.
feel like so often we have this cognitive dissonance that has happened over the last 45 years that we have all been trained that something to be healthy must be plant-based, right? And
Right.
like it has to be at least half your plate. And that if you're going to have a meat, it's got to be lean, or you could have a plant-based protein. But that cognitive dissonance is that teaching is what got us to be so very sick. So maybe if we just put our heads up and look around and say, do the very opposite, as you have done in the States, take the food guide and turn it upside down, right?
Yes.
Eat mostly meat based, eat mostly animals.
Following your account, I see you talk about many aspects of health, very carnivore, animal based. I mean, food, the foundation, I've noticed, but someone says I've got autoimmune or I've got, whether it's gastritis, colitis, Crohn's, all of these things. I know we would say eat meat. Yes.
Yes.
What else would you say to them?
I think that one of the hardest things is to get people to trust fat.
Yeah.
Right. And so, people are okay. Like they'll eat the chicken breast and they'll have the fish. But I'm like, no, like, I mean, get a really fatty cut of meat and eat the fat. Right. But I feel like that is something that's hard for people to, number one, get a taste for, get the texture for. But then once they're onto it, it's like, now I get it. Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Actually, I had a colleague I met there was a low carb meeting, and she was talking about how carnivore has healed her depression, that she had been eating, low fat, high carb for decades, dealt with a lot of anxiety and depression, even suicidality. And one night she took a container of cream and she drank. And
Yeah.
she woke up the next morning and she said, I felt as though something had just lifted. It cracked. It was just done. And she's like, I'm not going back. Right. So for her, that fat was a real epiphany. It was just like, this is how I'm supposed to nourish myself. But otherwise, I think for me, what I would encourage people to, yeah, eat the meat, look after your sleep, right? Because I feel like so often in our modern lives, we throw sleep underneath the bus, right? And we stay up and we scroll until like 2 o'clock in the morning. We lead very dark days and very bright nights. And metabolically, that's horrible for us and leaves us inflamed, right?
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. And dealing with stress, get outside, get some sunshine in your face in the morning. Make sure you wind down at night, have a bedtime routine. These are simple things that, simple's not always easy, but
No.
makes a world of difference in our metabolic health. But if we just live to keep our metabolic health safe, right? And the biggest part of that is how we nourish ourselves, what we put in our mouths.
I love you. You have such a just a kind spirit. And I think it's partly because, I mean, you're a doctor, but you've lived it. You've suffered. You always come across to me in your posts as just grateful. And that's one thing I have noticed in this space.
Mm,
Carnivores, we are some grateful people.
it's
And I
true.
and I think it is because we have tried everything. Most people don't come to this lightly. This is not the first bit of advice we ever followed.
Yeah.
And we suffered. And
Yeah.
people who suffered and then get to live another way, we we just hit different.
Oh, it's a second chance at life.
Yes.
Right? And so I would love to intervene and give people that opportunity. Like, start that second chance now. Don't wait until you have your heart attack. Don't wait until you have to have your legs cut off. Like, do it
Mhm.
now, right? But I do really feel that these issues of food addiction are so strong. Like, and how many times have, we both heard someone say, I just can't give up my bread, right? And
Yes.
there are things and like, well, that's addiction, right? So continued consumption, despite known consequence, is the definition of addiction. So get rid of it for 2 weeks and see. Maybe all of a sudden that IBS does get better. Maybe those anxious thoughts aren't so prevalent, right? There are so many things that just to do that experiment, that N of one, and see what the impact is. But nobody is suffering eating this way. We are all loving our food, right? And I feel there are so many different options with eating carnivore, right? So there's, that said, today I actually just cooked up a pound of ground beef with 10 eggs this morning. And that's going to be like, I had some of it for breakfast and I'll have some of it for supper, right? Dead
Perfect.
easy, right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it can be so easy. I ate mostly burger patties for 10 years. And then I know I also have a copy of Courtney Luna's book cookbook, which is just full of so many, more elaborate, some of it very simple,
Yeah.
but there's carnivore pizza now.
Yeah.
I'd never even thought of a carnivore pizza when I was first starting, but for people who enjoy cooking and like that brings them joy, you can be a little bit of a foodie and still be a carnivore.
I have 3 sons, and my youngest guy, he has always enjoyed cooking in the kitchen. And so for Super Bowl Sunday, we made chicken chips, right? So we just took that pound of ground chicken and rolled it out super, super, super flat, and then cooked it in a hot oven for like 40 minutes and super crispy.
Oh, how easy. So tasty. I do
Yeah.
chicken chips in the dehydrator. Just
Oh,
really thin chicken, dehydrate it, and it's so crispy.
yeah.
It's great. Do you
So
have a dehydrator?
I don't have a dehydrator, although I know most of the air fryers have that function.
Yes,
But
they do.
yeah, but I do, and I've made some jerky in there before too, which is delicious.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody asked me today about taking beef fat trimmings because a lot of us fry those up. She said, "Is there a way to do that as like dehydrated, almost like jerky?" Oh, is there ever?
Oh, is there?
Yeah, cut thin, about like not quite as thin as bacon, a little
Mhm.
thicker. You
Yeah,
can season it up, lay the raw fat, just my dehydrator has several shelves.
yeah.
Cover it in fat and just dehydrate it. Oh, it is to die for. You can
Um,
season it if you want. Like there's a
yeah,
tahine seasoning that has just a touch of that lime taste to it, no
yeah,
sweetener,
yeah.
or, any seasoning you like. It's good, even plain. But
Oh,
yeah,
love it. I'm gonna have to give that a try.
yeah, you can got to get a dehydrator now. Or
Add it
like
to
you
my
say,
collection of air fryers.
yes, I do. I've got two air fryers and one of them will dehydrate, but it's just that one flat surface, I'm like, I'm going to need several shelves for this, but you could try it out, see what you think before you
Yeah.
invest.
Well, it's funny too because my husband and I, so we've been living on 20 acres of land for like 24 years. And we've had a good neighbor that, he's a farmer and he's just been using the land for hay. But last year, I turned to my husband and said, we need to put some cows on this land. So we put in an electric fence and we got two heifers. And they were a Devon Highland mix, and it was beautiful meat. So they had a wonderful life. They
Yep.
were 2 years old when we got them. They were 2.5 when they went to slaughter, but just absolutely delicious meat and 100% grass fed. And we've got two freezers just filled with beef and tallow.
Oh,
Yeah, so yeah, we've got no end to the beef.
beautiful. Yep. You
Yeah,
took care of them and now they take care of you.
absolutely.
I love it. That's
Yeah.
great. Okay. So the few basic things that if somebody is watching and they are still in pain, I think when you talked about the addiction piece, it's huge. And just like many addictions, a group would help. It
Yeah.
does not have to be my group. Do you do any coaching or group work?
Yeah, I just started coaching in November. So I've been meeting people online, helping them make the transition away and dealing with food addiction, right? And
Yes.
it's been really, it's a challenge for people to give it up and stay clean. And sometimes people fall down, but that's how we learn, right? So every time there's a cheat, well, let's see, why did that happen? What were you feeling? What led you down that road? And so, yeah, I think for all of us, we fall off every now and again. And for me, I gotta say, I've been really lucky because I have a very powerful reason to stay on track. I get an immediate reminder if I waver, right? So it hasn't been an issue with me. But the only thing I deviate on is I might have some yogurt, and sometimes the dairy can sometimes inflame me a little bit. So and I do suggest for people, if that's the case, like if they can't do dairy, then they could do some ferments, because I think ferments are helpful for a lot of people for intestinal dysbiosis, because so much of our health and our healing comes from our intestines. So if they are inflamed and angry, then maybe some ferments will help people that do have more aggressive forms of inflammation like IBD.
If somebody is interested in ferments, but they can't handle fiber, are there any suggestions for those folks?
Yes, so there are certainly non-dairy kefirs, and I have to look for them that are clean and safe. That there's zero fiber. I know of one in my local area that's made out of coconut, so people can take like a tablespoon of that coconut kefir every day, or people can take a probiotic supplement as a pill. That is another option as well. But yeah, most of the ferments come as either fermented fruit or fermented vegetables. The other option is sometimes just to drink the juice off of the sauerkraut, just to get the bacteria. And of course, the nice thing about ferments is they produce more nutrients than the natural food has. So, for example, when people eat sauerkraut, they actually get vitamin C and K2 from the bacteria that have been working on the cabbage. So that is also another benefit of the ferments.
Interesting. I have known people who have gotten some relief with the kraut juice. They said, I don't
Yes.
want to add back spoons of fiber, but just a little bit of kraut juice.
Yeah.
They almost take it like a tablespoon of medicine every day.
I take, I take my olive oil, my omega-3 oil rather. So I
Yes.
take 2 grams of that a day. And like if I feel a flare coming on, I'll use a little bit of coconut kefir, just a tablespoon just to get the bacteria in.
Okay.
Yes.
Interesting. All right. So you talked about, obviously, we talked diet, about keeping our system calm, getting outside, sunshine, some deep breaths, feeling safe. If you know, somebody watching, if you know that you are suffering because of what we're putting in our body, every day is a choice of which one do you want more, the sugar, the carbs, whatever fibrous mess is jacking you up, or freedom from this pain. Like every day for Dr. Jocelyn and myself is a choice. We wake up every day and choose if we're going to eat the processed fibery junk we used to eat or have freedom from pain. And everybody has that same choice today.
Nothing tastes better than freedom.
Yes. Yeah,
Absolutely.
freedom from cravings, freedom from pain, freedom from needing that bathroom.
Yeah, it is. And I just feel like so many people say, oh, it's so restrictive. And it's the exact opposite. It is completely liberating, right? And so, yeah, I get it. We have created an artificial food environment where we think we have to have, 30 different types of toothpaste. Really, no, when it comes right down to it, we only need a few types of food. And we have been just absolutely taken aside by people in the processed food industry. They've been corrupted through their monetary goals to eat these foods that are drug foods. They cause not only a drug like effect, but they will make you have to take drugs if you eat them, right?
Yes. Yeah. That second meaning to drug foods.
Yeah.
Agreed. Oh,
Yeah.
and you mentioned sleep. Of course,
Mhm.
everything in our body is going to work better with sleep.
Absolutely. And I've been working on that. I spent years in a sleep deprived state, decades. So I have been working on, I was getting on average 6.5 hours a night. Now I'm getting 7.5 to 8 hours a night. And it feels so good, right? Because our brain needs to do its housekeeping too. Our lymphatic system, as we have a lymphatic system in our body, we have a glymphatic system in our brains that then cleans house when we're asleep. Isn't that lovely? It's like a little Roomba that comes around and fixes our brain up when we're sound asleep. Yeah. So yeah, to get that sleep and to deal with the inflammation too, right? So I've dealt with a lot of people in chronic pain through the years, and it's such a devastating thing to have is chronic pain. But if we can treat that through getting better sleep, I also encourage people with magnesium, not only as an anesthesiologist, I would give IV magnesium to all of my patients because it works so well as a pain reliever, cutting down on the amount of opiate people require. And most people are magnesium deficient. And when we look at things like even cardiac dysrhythmias, heart attacks, they are at an increased risk for people that don't have enough magnesium. So a little magnesium at night really helps people to get to sleep and deals with some of that pain. And of course, omega-3 comes out again, and omega-3 is fabulous as an anti-inflammatory.
I used to get leg cramps really badly, even at times as a carnivore, particularly when I was pregnant as a carnivore. I still got leg cramps. And I did not get relief from magnesium. I tried. I went through 3 bottles of that spray on topical. I was taking the glycinate. I was like, I don't know if it's the magnesium, but I do know plenty of people because I ask in the groups pretty often, how many of you find that magnesium helps? And it's quite a few people. So I think it's worth trying.
The other one for leg cramps is often potassium. And we know people that don't have enough potassium have way higher high blood pressure, more disease. So potassium is an integral part. It's a macro mineral. So we need that in grams, not milligrams. So I encourage people to get anywhere from like 3 to 4 grams of potassium a day. Now, if people have kidney failure and can't excrete their potassium, then they have to be a bit more careful, but that's very rare.
Okay. And I'm not in a phase where leg cramps are an issue. I'll tell you one thing that really helped mouth taping. We talked about sleep. Mouth taping was a game changer for my sleep, for my leg cramps. I really think it was like a nitric oxide issue where I wasn't getting the oxygen and what my muscles needed while I was asleep.
Yes, yeah, and it is. It's amazing. So again, back to the microbiome. Our first microbiome is in our mouth, right? And so if we look after that through not being mouth breathers, through using our nose, through not using fluoride toothpaste and mouthwash, through doing a little tongue scraping too, we are allowed to make the good bacteria flourish. The nitric oxide goes up, and it is one of our like most magical molecules we make. Everything as a vasodilator, it's an anticoagulant. It's our most powerful anticoagulant in our body. So yeah, we all need more nitric oxide.
Well, I think we've given people several things to think about here, Dr. Jocelyn. I love it.
Hope so. I hope so.
Yeah, I hope
Yeah.
so too. If any of you are watching right now and you are still in pain, or for heaven's sakes, if you were in pain and now you feel better and carnivore has helped, could you please just comment below to give some encouragement to folks who may have found this video because they're still in the heart of it, the heat of it, the depths of despair. So let's pull some people into the lifeboat, folks. Help us out. I'm so grateful for your message. Just what I have seen on Instagram, you are a light, and I know you are really helping. And I'm so grateful that you are here to help shed the light on this channel, too. It's a pleasure to know you better.
Thank you, Kelly. You are an inspiration, and thank you for your vision and for helping end the suffering of humans, because that's what both of us want.
Yes. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you,
Yeah.
Dr. Jocelyn. All right. Hope to see y'all back next Saturday. Bye. I feel good. You feel good?
I feel great.